All right, welcome back to episode 2 of the Vic and Cam show. We're stoked to be here. We are two best friends. Can I say best? I guess we are here.
Well, I'm your best friend, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know
you
if I
you
can
don't
say
know
that.
if it's
Yeah.
reciprocated. But we started this podcast recently and we're super excited. I am a sports dietitian working with primarily endurance athletes, and Cam is a sports PT and strength coach, also working with primarily endurance athletes. And so we're really excited to share helpful information. We're super grateful for those who are already listening to the show, who have listened and commented and that sort of thing. So keep sharing it. It makes us feel really good and we're excited to be back. So, how have you been, Cam?
I've been good. It's been been a great week. My kid started daycare on Monday, so it's been a bit bizarre not having him in the house 24/7. But with that comes getting some free time and some work time and some training time again, which is kind of nice. But yes, yeah, so I've been good, just getting back into a routine over here.
What are you training for, if anything?
I have broke the Broken Arrow Triple Crown in June. That's like the next big thing. I'm tentatively gonna run a 50K here in like 4 weeks or so. Still undecided at this point because I'm not feeling particularly fit. Because after the marathon, I went to Hawaii, didn't run at all, and then came back, didn't run at all. And I'm kind of jumping back into it this week and we're going to see where the next couple weeks can go. Not following any professional recommendations of jumping into things or not jumping into things too fast. I'm definitely doing that. Seeing if I can front load a little bit of running volume in the 4 weeks that I have, and going to see where that takes me. And maybe I'll do it. Maybe I won't. We'll see.
Which 50K?
It's Joe Corsione's 50K down in Tucson, the Desert Peak Ultra. So he has a 50K and
Nice.
100K options. The 100K is on Saturday, the 50K is on Sunday. So tentatively going to go down there. We've been chatting about it a little bit. I reached out to him last week and I just asked, hey, is this like a technical course? Because I've been running roads all winter. And I was hoping he was going to get back to me like, it's like really smooth, flowy trail. But he responded with, this is an incredibly technical and steep course. There's a couple runnable sections or fast runnable sections, but a lot of it's just baby head rocks that you're managing. And
Jeez.
um, so we'll see. I might just throw myself into the fire. It's fun to do that sometimes, but yeah, undecided.
Nice. No, and you're a Phoenix boy, so those trails, you're right at home down there, kind of,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I've been trying to get on the most technical stuff in my backyard over here. Um,
Yeah.
and there's a good amount of it. So I tried to go do Blue Dot today. And that was
Oh,
like a nice slap in the face, be like, hey, you haven't been running trails. I bailed
I
on it.
mean, that barely counts as a trail. It's like
Yeah, it's
freaking
hiking.
straight
Yeah, if
up.
anyone's not familiar with Blue Dot, it's basically a trail right in my backyard, literally like a mile and a half or 2 miles away from my house. You just run there all on trails. And once you get there, it kind of takes you up to the top of this little mountain called TV Hill, which is right next to Eldon, and then you kind of bop on over to Eldon. But it's about a mile long, and you get about 2,000 feet in the course of a mile. So it's just really steep hiking. There's a couple flat runnable spot, not flat. Okay, there's a couple runnable spots that give you a little bit of a break, but most of the time it's just unrelenting up on some slabs and some loose dirt trail. Um, so yeah, I went out there to try to do that today, and I don't know, I wasn't wearing the right shoes, didn't bring water, didn't bring nutrition, classic stuff that I do. And I got about like a quarter of the way up, and I'm like, what am I doing? I just turned around and I'm like, I'm just gonna go run some other stuff.
Nice. I miss those trails.
Yeah,
Blue
they're
Dot's
great.
great because why it's called Blue Dot is because there's like these blue spray painted dots on the rocks that you kind of because it's really
Right.
easy to get lost. I don't know. I used to get lost on that mountain all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, the trail's a little bit more defined than it was a few years ago. I think it's gotten more popular. And people have come through and remarked the blue dots on some of the trail, which there's been some
Mm.
disagreement about that, because it's a
Ooh.
more of a local style trail. And it's more of a wild kind of trail too. So kind of making it more of a popularized trail and yeah, just a little bit easier is not something that everyone wants. I personally don't mind at all. It doesn't matter to me. No matter what, I'm the only one ever out there, no matter what. So it's not like it's busy or anything. Um,
No.
but yeah, it's a hard trail to find sometimes. So you just kind of look for the rocks and you look for the little blue dots to kind of guide you up the mountain.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, it's
That's a
great.
good loop, going up and then coming down like Eldon Lookout
Yeah,
or
that was the plan today. But I wasn't prepared.
well, next
Yeah.
time.
I didn't
Um
have chili for lunch like I did yesterday though. And so I went out a little bit more prepared than I did yesterday, but um yeah, anyway.
that chili, that's a brutal. Actually, one of our listener questions was about fiber, and I think at some point I'll want to do like a full-blown episode on fiber and the benefits and the costs of fiber for endurance athletes. So we'll probably talk more about that later. But yeah,
Yeah, definitely
chili
should.
pre-run, not a good idea.
Yeah, those beans, man.
They'll get you. They'll get you.
Will get you.
Well, any other news or current events you want to cover?
No news or current events. Yeah, just getting back into the swing of things. What about you?
I have been sick, which is not good.
Ugh.
I don't know if you can tell, my throat hurts and my nose is all stuffy. So anyway, hoping to come out of that pretty soon, but I haven't been sleeping good because of that. And then it's, that frustrating feeling when you're not sleeping, but you know you need to be sleeping to get better, and then it's just this cycle. So,
Yeah, that sucks. You don't look good either.
I mean, that's normal,
Yeah.
but
Well,
yeah,
that's what you look the same as you normally look.
okay, yeah,
What I'm
thanks.
getting at.
Thanks, Cam.
Yeah.
No, but we're excited for what's on tap today. Um, I think how we're gonna break up most of these episodes is Cam and I will talk about a topic or a subject within our respective areas of expertise. And if we have inputs for each other while we're talking about those things, of course, we will comment, and then we'll do some listener questions if we have time at the end of this one, which we got a lot. So thanks. Keep them coming. Um, so if you edit that out, um, if you haven't listened to episode one, we both kind of gave overviews of like why nutrition and strength training are important for endurance athletes. And I kind of gave a brief overview of like the different aspects. I call them umbrellas of sports nutrition and fueling for athletes. So I wanted to get a little bit more uh, granular and specific with some of those topics, because pretty much everything that I'm gonna cover as far as sports nutrition and fueling will fall into these different topics, right? For the duration of this episode, but also, the podcast episodes to come, everything's gonna kind of fall under this. So I wanted to kind of give like a structure. So and maybe we'll have to put like a link, like a visual of this in the show notes or something, because it's really helpful to think about it this way to make sure you're not missing pieces of your nutrition as you're trying to dial things in. Um, so what I based these topics off of is everything that I've included in my online course. Um, And the reason it's in my online course is because it's the things that are the most important. In coaching over the last 7 or so years, I've talked about a lot of different topics, and each individual has different needs. But there have been kind of these themes that have stayed consistent throughout. And those are the themes that I talk about in my online course, which we'll also link to in the show notes. Um, but the reason they're in the course they're the things that actually matter. Like if you're gonna focus on a couple of things, these are the things that matter. Um, so there's kind of two main categories. One is day-to-day nutrition, and the other is fueling and hydration for training and racing. So within that day-to-day nutrition, there's a few different topics. Okay. So one thing that we always make sure that athletes are doing when we're working with athletes is eating the right amount. And this is like if we're to put things on like a hierarchy of needs, like if you're familiar with like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the bottom of day-to-day nutrition, eating enough would be the first topic, right? And so many athletes struggle with this. Um, when I was in grad school, I actually wrote a Substack on this, but I did a study where I had 40, I think it was 40 uh, ultra runners log their food in Chronometer in this food logging app. They logged it over the course of a week. Um, And then I compared what they logged to what they were burning because they were also tracking their exercise. And I think only about half of them, only about 20 out of the 40 were eating the same amount that they were burning. So about half of those athletes were in this calorie deficit, which is very problematic. If you've heard about REDS or relative energy deficiency in sport, very big problem in ultra running and other endurance sports. We'll probably that probably merits its own episode at some point. Um, but it's a big issue. If you're not eating enough, then your body's not going to have what it needs to repair and to have the energy you need to do the workouts and race and feel good. And it's not going to have what it needs to even do your normal basic human functions outside of sport either. Um, so that's the very first thing we want to make sure is like, is the athlete eating enough? Now, occasionally, an athlete could be eating too much. Maybe they have certain body composition goals. Or maybe they want to lose body fat or something like that. And then we need to look at it from that perspective as well. But there's always kind of this balance between are we creating too big of a deficit to help someone lose weight? And then getting close to that risk of REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport, where you get injured, or you get sick, that sort of thing. So that's the very first thing we look at. And no, it's not glamorous, no, it's not fun, but it's the most important thing. So like if you're going to pay attention to anything within sports nutrition, just eating enough in your day to day is so, so crucial. Um,
I have a question
then
for you there before you move on.
yes, yes.
And maybe you're going to cover this, but obviously it's like, all right, eating enough or overeating or undereating requires kind of knowing how much you need to eat. So as someone who doesn't track anything in Chronometer, and someone who just doesn't maybe have the time to always be kind of tracking every meal they have, how does someone know how much to eat or how much to not eat without just being very in tune with tracking and putting everything down on a website or an app?
Yeah, that's a great question. And ideally you don't have to track, right? Like it's kind of a pain in the rear to have to track your food every day. Um, how I think about it is like it's a helpful tool to kind of like use as training wheels where you kind of learn what it feels like to eat the right amount. Um, and then once you've done that and and we'll talk about making sure you're getting the right nutrients as well. But once you kind of know what that feels like and what that looks like and what types of meals that includes, the frequency at which you need to eat, the amounts that you need to eat, then you can kind of leave that tracking a little bit. And maybe you're doing a check-in, once a month or something, just to like make sure, or maybe you're like in higher volume training all of a sudden and you're wanting to make sure you're getting what you need. Um, then maybe it would be helpful to track again. But like we have hunger and satiation cues for a reason. Um, so for the most part, if you're listening to those, you're probably going to be pretty close to breaking even. Um, a lot of times though, what I see is like an athlete will have a certain training volume, like let's say it's here, um, and their hunger cues will match that training volume. And then they bump up their training volume and their hunger cues match that training volume again. But then there becomes a certain point where their training volume is like so high that their hunger cues can't quite match it. And so they might feel full, like they might feel satiated, but they've still got this big calorie deficit and they might not even know it. But maybe their training is starting to plateau, their recovery isn't great, maybe they're low energy on their workouts. Um, and so in those times, like it can be really helpful to be aware of how much you're needing to eat. And then like it sounds bad, but you almost have to like force those extra few hundred calories to break even if that's your goal, which for most people it should be. You should be trying to break even with your calories. So yeah, ideally you don't have to track every day. It's kind of a tool to help you learn what that feels like. But if you want to really know roughly what you need and what you've been doing, tracking is really helpful. Um, and I would recommend Chronometer if you are going to track. That's kind of the tried and true app that I use with my athletes. Does that help answer that question?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Um, so once we know you're eating enough, now we focus on like what types of foods you're eating, right? And that plays more into the macronutrients and micronutrients. So we want to make sure that carbohydrate intake, protein intake, and fat intake is where it needs to be in that order for endurance athletes. And so again, we usually look at that in the context of tracking and compare that to where athletes need to be. And we will go deeper into each of these topics, but just to give you a recommendation. So, carbohydrate intake for endurance athletes in regular training should usually be around 5 to 10 grams per kilo per day, per kilo of body weight per day. Which for a lot of people that can feel like a lot more than they've been doing. It's not actually that difficult if you know kind of the types of things to do, and the types of foods to look at, and if you're focusing on it. But it's usually more than people are used to doing at first. Um, and then with protein, current recommendations are anywhere from about 1.6 grams up to about 2.2 grams per kilo per day. Which again, that can also kind of feel like a lot of protein. And those ranges are dependent on training volume. So if you, relative to your normal volume, if you're at the higher end, then you should probably be at the higher end of those ranges, right? And then fat kind of just makes up everything else that is left over, all of the other calories that you need. It's not hard to get enough fat usually. Um, we want to go no lower than about 20% of your calories from fat, though. So there's not like any definite targets there, but we don't want to go lower than 20%. That's where you start seeing like hormonal issues and things like that. Um, so that's just like a brief overview. We've got the main thing we need to focus on is eating enough. Once we know we're eating enough, all right, where should that be coming from? Mostly carbs, protein, and then a little bit of fat. And then we want to make sure that the athletes are getting the right amount of each of the micronutrients. And there's certain micronutrients that are especially important for endurance athletes, like iron, B12, vitamin D, calcium. These are ones that, again, in that study that I did with the endurance runners, those were the ones that they were consistently low on intakes with. Doing blood work is also incredibly helpful with identifying those deficits and then understanding if we need to just increase certain foods or change the timing of when we're, eating those foods or whether we need to supplement, right? Um, so eating enough macronutrients, micronutrients, and then just getting in the habit of like making sure those things are on repeat. Um, Finding what barriers you have. So maybe it's, if you're busy like me and Cam, and it's hard to get back from a run and then go straight into work or straight into childcare. Um, Maybe finding a workaround where it's like, well, if I don't have time to make breakfast after a run or a smoothie, all right, I'm gonna meal prep some smoothie bags and put that in the fridge or in the freezer, so that, it saves, even though that would only be 5 minutes that would save. Um, it's all ready to go. You just dump it in the blender, blend it up, and then you've got your smoothie, your recovery smoothie while you're starting work or whatever. Um, so getting into the habits of doing these things consistently, and they're not glamorous, they're not exciting, they're not sexy. This aspect of sports nutrition is not what media is focusing on. And it's way more important or just as important, but I would even venture to say more important than carbs per hour and sweat rate testing and sodium bicarb and all these things that we'll talk about as well. But this day in and day out, just eating enough, eating nutrient dense foods is so important. So that's kind of that first umbrella.
What types of symptoms might someone be feeling if they are lacking in some of those micronutrients like iron, B12, vitamin D, calcium? I guess what might those day-to-day symptoms or kind of long-term symptoms be that would encourage them to maybe want to get some blood work done?
Yeah, so all of those are directly related with, well, specifically iron, B12, folate. Those are related to how your body is going to make red blood cells and transport oxygen. And so if your red blood cells are not getting made correctly, or they're the wrong size or the wrong amount, or they're not transporting oxygen like they should to your muscle cells, that sort of thing, then you're going to feel low energy. And you're going to feel low energy in your day to day, right? You're going to feel really tired. And it's important to distinguish between, am I really tired because I'm sick right now or because I didn't sleep well because I was up all night with our baby or whatever. That's different. This is like consistent low energy throughout the day, and especially during your training sessions, you're probably gonna feel that. Um, and a lot of times that could also just be related to underfueling in general. But usually those go hand in hand. When someone's not eating enough food or enough calories, they're also not getting the types of foods that have iron and B12 and vitamin D and things like that. So a lot of times they go hand in hand. But yeah, usually you'll feel tired. You'll feel like you're not recovering well. Um, and you're just kind of like lagging um in life and in your workouts, if that
Yeah,
makes
that makes
sense.
sense. And that's where our worlds start to meld together a little bit because if that goes on for too long, then they start getting injuries, right? Predominantly underfueling is going to lead to bone stress injuries. So whenever I'm not to steal your segment here, but it's like
Take it
whenever
away.
I'm working with someone and we're concerned about a bone stress injury, I start asking these questions. We're talking about nutrition, we're talking about just subjective symptoms of how they've been feeling over the last few weeks. Do they feel like they've been recovering well? Have you been excessively tired? Have runs been plateaued and just not feeling strong? Because then that gives me an idea into their physiology of what is actually going on within their body to know, okay, are you underfueling? And now are you taking the brunt of the load through your musculoskeletal system without being able to recover, and then potentially getting a stress fracture. So those things are directly correlated. And like you said, talking about reds and stuff probably warrants its own whole episode in conjunction with talking about bone stress injuries too. So perhaps we'll save that for a future date.
Yeah, for sure. Cam really just wishes he was a dietitian, and so anytime he can talk about those things with his athletes, he does.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it's a superior
Yeah. I
career.
mean, I'm always recommending they eat like chili for lunch. Lots of raw potatoes out on the run. Yeah, raw milk, all those things. They're all, we
And
go through all with
if they're
them.
like, do you know anyone who can help me more specifically with this? You're like, no, not really. I don't think I know
I'm just
anyone.
like, you just need more potatoes and more
Just
milk.
yeah. I mean, that usually is the answer. Like
Yeah,
more carbs, throw carbs
exactly.
at any problem, and pretty
Your
much you'll
job
fix
is
it.
cake
So yeah, yeah.
or cake. You can have cake.
More cake, more
Yeah,
potatoes. It's great.
yeah.
Um, okay, so yeah, so that's kind of that day-to-day umbrella that things fall under that we'll be dissecting each of those variables and those topics as we move through this podcast. Um, and then we have our other umbrella. Sorry, my throat is terrible. We have that other umbrella that's more of the performance nutrition. So that's has more to do with what you're doing right around your training and your racing. Um, and again, these are the topics that I have in my online course that you can go through. Um, this is usually the order that I go through these topics as well. And those are hydration, sodium and other electrolytes, carbohydrate and other fuel intake, and then ergogenic aids like caffeine and sodium bicarb and things like that. Um, the reason I start with hydration, and this is when I get, I don't know, I feel like half the questions that come through, whether that's in coaching or even in your listener questions, like hydration and electrolytes is huge. People are so confused about how much they need and how they should be thinking about that. And I get it. It's confusing. There's a lot of conflicting information out there, even among dietitians. There's some dietitians who are like, you need electrolytes in everything. You can't even use water without electrolytes. You need to be putting element in all of your bottles all day. And it's like, that's one school of thought. And there's other people who are like, no, you can just drink plain water all the time. Um, fall somewhere in the middle. I feel like that's where most of the evidence points to. But they're so important, and they're important because everything else kind of hinges on these. Um, if you've ever been behind on your hydration in a race, that usually ends up being kind of the first domino to fall. And usually it presents with nausea, and we'll talk about why that is later. But usually that presents with nausea, and then you end up getting uh, nauseated, and then you can't eat, right? And so you get behind on your fuel, and then you bonk, and then it's really, really hard to come back from that cycle, right? Because you don't feel like drinking, you don't feel like eating because you're already nauseated. And so that's why hydration is key. Usually with my athletes, when we're starting, we'll do a lot of sweat rate testing. We'll do some sweat sodium concentration testing. Those are different. We'll talk about the differences and the different ways to do that later. Um, but understanding how much you're losing is crucial to know how much you need to take in for your hydration and your sodium. And they play off of each other. Your sodium needs are dependent on how much fluid you're going to replace. It's kind of complex. And there are some graphics that I'll want to show you guys that'll make it easier to understand. Um, but those are the first two that we really get into. They're so important. Um, Once someone kind of understands what they need to be doing as far as fluid intakes and sodium and other electrolyte intakes goes, then we talk about carbs. Then we talk about fueling. Um, that's obviously one that has taken ultra running and trail running and cycling in recent years by storm. It's been really, really important, often called like the carb revolution, with everyone doing more and more and more. Um, and that being said, more isn't always better. With carbohydrate intake, we have to take it from a very personalized approach. You have to, A, be able to digest and absorb the amount of carbs, but also we have to talk about, I was just talking about this with one of my athletes today, like, do we even know that you're oxidizing, or are your muscle cells even actually using that many grams of carbs an hour? And we don't necessarily know that, right? And so you could be digesting and taking in 140 grams an hour. That's pretty high. Uh, are you actually using that? We don't really know unless, you do some pretty invasive testing. Um, so understanding what works for you is so important, and then practicing with that amount. So you're training your gut, and always kind of pushing that number a little bit. We'll talk about techniques and how to train the gut probably on another episode as well. So we've got hydration, sodium intake, carb intake, and then the last one that we focus on is ergogenic aids. So that could be any sort of supplement or extra thing that you're taking or doing that can improve performance. Um, there's a few of these things that over the years have been shown to really improve performance, and some that don't have a lot of evidence. And unfortunately, uh, people who market these things don't care. If there's money to be made, they don't care how much actual clinical evidence is behind them. Um, so, for example, things like uh, we're not going to get sponsored by Ketone IQ now, but uh, ketones, for example, like sure, we have some anecdotal evidence. There's a few studies, but in my opinion, there's not enough empirical evidence to regularly be telling athletes, yeah, you should be taking this, before or during or even after, which sometimes I'll have athletes do. But there's just not enough evidence there. We can get into different ergogenic aids, but things like caffeine, um, or creatine, like there's really, really strong evidence over the years, and we know specific dosing, and we know how to apply that for endurance athletes. And so, especially if an athlete has the basics, if they're eating enough, their day-to-day umbrella is covered, they're all good there. They've got the hydration, electrolytes, carbohydrate intake down. Then we kind of start talking about, all right, let's work in some of these, caffeine and maybe sodium bicarb and things like that.
What do you think about tart cherry juice?
Uh, I honestly get that question so often. There is some pretty good evidence, just because people study it a lot. It just keeps getting studied over and over and over. Uh, it's very high in antioxidants, just like any other red or purple or blue fruit like that. Uh, it's called anthocyanins, and those are going to be very anti-inflammatory. They're usually going to be good vasodilators, so they open up your blood vessels. Um, they're good. They're very high in vitamin C. So basically, cellular damage that happens during exercise can kind of be offset by things like tart cherry juice. Um, so too much of it too quickly, and this is actually kind of entering in more on your realm, but like things like icing directly after every single strength workout, probably not a good idea because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like that can be quite anti-inflammatory, like bring down some of that inflammation, and you actually want some of that inflammation to make those adaptations from training. And it's similar with nutrition. We don't want like super high dose vitamin C right after every single workout. We want to feel a little bit sore sometimes. Now, if you're chronically inflamed and you're always feeling like you're just sore all the time, you're never feeling fresh, that's too much. Either we need to back off training a little bit, or probably increase some of these anti-inflammatory foods. to help offset that a little bit.
Yeah. That's so interesting that you said that because I literally had a call like a couple hours ago of a client asking if he should cold plunge every day. But his the reason he wanted to ask was because like, oh, I've heard that you want some inflammation after your runs or after your strength sessions. I told him to do it, and here's why. Mainly because we start to with a lot of your work and my work, we there, there's a lot of research out there, and we start to go into the realm of theoretical type of things happening and theoretical concepts rather than like realistic concepts and what's actually happening. And I feel like the whole inflammation thing is a very theoretical thing. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of people like, oh, you shouldn't cold plunge after all these things because it reduces inflammation. You want the inflammation to repair and recover, which is in theory completely correct. But we can't measure what inflammation, or there's not much studies out there that do measure what inflammation is happening in the body after someone's cold plunge. They look at things like performance, they look at things like subjective feelings and stuff like that. But to say that, there's going to be no inflammation after a hard workout when you go do these things is completely based on theory and not in reality. So, to my point, when I told him to recommend it, he had some chronic things going on. So I'm like, okay, well, just like you said, chronic inflammation is ugly. Like you don't want that in your body. It doesn't do anything except hurt you. So if there's anything you can do to reduce that, that's going to be ideal. But back to tart cherry juice, I asked because I just started having tart cherry juice. And because it's I'm on Instagram and I see everyone drinking tart cherry juice. I'm like, I'm gonna get some of this from the store. Um,
It's
but
it's unlikely that it's hurting anything. So
yeah,
I
it
would
is
say if you like it, go for it.
it is funny to talk about like supplements a little bit. Do you watch? I'm gonna bring them up, but do you watch any of the swap shows or like any of the Roach like YouTube?
I usually don't
Yes.
watch them. I mean,
Okay.
I listen
I'm a huge
occasionally.
swap fan. I mean, David and Megan Roach are super
They're
funny and
amazing.
obviously
Yeah.
experts at what they do. But there was a show they had a little while ago that I was watching. I don't remember what it was. And he was talking about all of the supplements he takes, and obviously he's sponsored by the feed, so super realistic for that. But he had them all out on his counter, and I was looking at all the various things. I'm like, that is like over $1,000 a month worth of supplements. And
Oh
it's like
yeah.
insane. Obviously, if you can get them, at a reduced cost or free, then why not, right? If they're not going to hurt you. But teasing apart like what's actually helpful versus what isn't for someone who doesn't have access to sponsorships or doesn't have access to a significant amount of money to get supplements is ideal. So talking about what works versus actually what doesn't work.
Yeah, 100%. There that it reminds me of like the Nomeo, which like everyone's doing that right now. It's like the broccoli shots.
Oh, I haven't even heard
Um,
of this.
it's like broccoli sprouts like condensed into this little
Sweet.
shot.
I'm gonna get some.
Um, yeah, Camp's gonna go order some now because he's loaded and can order all of these things. Um, it's like not everyone can do that after every workout. Like if you could, yeah, there's probably benefits and there's probably benefits for long-term health too. But for those of you that can't, like eat broccoli, put kale in your smoothies. Like that's affordable,
Mhm.
you know? And it's likely, again, we don't have studies to my awareness where we're pitting those against each other and one is much more concentrated, but it's going to have sulforaphane. It's going to have the same uh, micronutrients and superpower ingredients in that real food that a lot of these supplements are going to have. Or if you can't afford tart cherry juice, like eat some cherries or throw blueberries into your smoothie. Like honestly, it's probably going to have a very, very similar effect.
Just
Um,
remember that cherries have a big pit or a seed in the middle, so don't
yes, please
don't
don't choke.
don't eat the
Do we
pit.
need like
Disclaimer:
a
Do
disclaimer
not
on this
choke on cherry.
podcast?
Don't choke on
If you
cherries. If you choke on a cherry eating this, we are not legally
you're not
responsible
liable.
for
No,
your
no,
injury
no, we
or
are not.
harm or emotional or mental harm caused by choking on a cherry.
100%. But
Yeah.
it reminds me too, because like in sports nutrition research. a lot of times the same things get studied over and over and over again, which is how scientific research works usually, or you're tweaking one aspect of a study and then seeing if it still holds true. Um, you're basically trying to prove things wrong, not prove things right in science, right? So the same things get tested over and over and over again. And then those are the things that companies are like, oh, there's this study that exists on tart cherry juice. It decreases, C-reactive protein, inflammatory markers in athletes. So let's make a product and sell it, right? And that's true, but that doesn't mean that other foods couldn't also be doing that. It's just that they haven't been studied necessarily, right? So like there's a decent amount of study on like blueberries and similar um or I guess a better example would be like nitrates, which we'll talk about. Um Nitrous oxide production in your bloodstream. Um Beets and beetroot juice. There's like beet elite powder, right? So there's like all these beet supplements. Um Arugula or rocket lettuce has more nitrates than beets. Um, but you don't see the product being made with arugula, right? Because there haven't been the same
Spicy.
studies, right? And maybe it's harder to get down. But honestly, when I'm trying to boost my nitrate intake, I'll instead of kale in my smoothie the week of a race, I'll just do arugula in the smoothie. And yeah, it kind of tastes funky, but like I'm getting a bunch of nitrates and I don't have to spend a ton of money on like that Beat Elite stuff, which great. If they want to sponsor the show, reach out to us. I'm not anti that, but uh, it just kind of goes to show that like just because a product is being sold or it's the one that everyone talks about in the studies doesn't mean that there aren't also other things that can also help you achieve those same benefits that might be cheaper or more accessible or more like less sexy or like just they're just more boring. There's like things you have in your cupboard already, you know?
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's kind
Great.
of a rundown of like the types of topics that we'll really get into and kind of how to think about and prioritize your nutrition. Prioritize that day-to-day stuff and then get into the sports nutrition stuff where you're looking at hydration, sodium, and other electrolytes, but mostly sodium, carbohydrate intake and training the gut, and then ergogenic aids. And that's kind of the order that you should be looking at these things with.
Cool. That was super helpful. Thanks, Vic.
You're welcome. Hopefully that
All right.
wasn't
Well,
too deep.
I'll kind of mosey on into my topics here. I'm going to keep it relatively simple. The goal here is to really just inform you on strength. So we're going to talk about the basics of strength. We're going to talk about what that is, what you should be doing, and how you can structure that. So kind of like Vic, had an umbrella for everything, and kind of looking at most things from like a bird's eye view. We're going to do the same thing. So um, this is mainly derived because I just see so many athletes a lot of the time getting, kind of muddled with all the information out there in terms of what they're supposed to do, what exercises are right, what actual strength is, and seeing athletes just kind of do the wrong thing over the course of years or their entire life just because the information's not concise. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that real quick. But basically, all right, so we'll talk about the what strength is. All right, so strength in itself is obviously the ability to produce force in your muscles. And there is really only one way to accomplish that. And that way is to load up the muscles in a way where they are getting close to failing at doing the task you want them to do. So dumbed down, it means lifting heavy, basically. So when you are trying to increase strength throughout your body, you need to be doing things with very specific parameters in order to actually do that. Those parameters come in the terms of sets and reps. So sets are just how many times you're going through a certain set of exercises. So for example, if I said you're doing 3 sets of 10 squats, for someone who doesn't understand this, I think most people do, you're going to do 10 squats in a row. You're going to take a break and you're going to do that 3 times. All right.
Sometimes I get sometimes I get confused when when I'm following your workout on what's it called?
True
Coach.
coach. You've been
Yes,
on it for
True
years. I
Coach.
do not know the name of it.
I don't know, I just open it. Um and it is oh man, my voice is crazy right now. It is confusing sometimes like 3 sets of 10 3 times at this weight or I don't know. It's like I think for someone who hasn't spent a ton of time in the gym, it
Hmm.
can be confusing sometimes.
For sure. Yeah. So sets and reps are how most strength exercises are broken down. So you do things in a way where you're doing a certain amount in one set, and that is to accomplish a specific goal. So if I said you're going to do 3 sets of 30 of something where you can do 30 in a row, all right, that's going to accomplish the goal of endurance, maybe some mobility, maybe a little bit of activation in a muscle. Versus if I said, okay, you're going to do 5 sets of 5 exercises, this is where we're going to venture into the strength aspect of things because that means that you're lifting heavier. So, within those parameters, that's typically what guides how much weight you're going to use. So if you're going to go and do 30 of something, you probably can't do it with a really heavy weight. Okay. If you're going to do 5 of something, you probably need to use a heavy weight because if you can do more than 5, then you're going to start venturing into that endurance world. Okay. So if you can do 5, 10, 15, 20 of them, you're no longer working on strength. But if you can do somewhere between like 4 to 8 and then you're kind of maxed out, that's what's going to build strength. And the reason is because it loads up the muscle in a way where it's having to produce a lot of force and produce near maximal force. And the only way we can build strength is to produce that force so then our body can adapt. It can repair our muscles, it can adapt, and then it can actually get physically stronger and produce more force. Now, this doesn't always mean the muscle is going to get bigger. It's just it gets stronger because there are a lot of neuromuscular mechanisms at play too that actually enhance the amount of force that we're producing. So this will be good for all future episodes. Anytime I say strength exercises or anytime I'm talking about strength, I'm talking about those exercises where you are doing somewhere between 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe getting to 8, but maybe mostly that 4 to 6 rep range. And you're not doing more than that because you physically can't do more than that. Okay. I think I see these parameters confused a lot that if someone's just doing the sets and reps, it's going to work strength. So someone might be doing 4 sets of 6 exercises and they're calling that strength, but they're not sticking to the parameters of what it should feel like. So they're doing 6 of them and then they're stopping, but they could go on and do 15 if they wanted to. So if that's the case, that's not working strength. It needs to be at the end of those reps, at the end of that set, it needs to be near failure, maybe 1 or 2 left in the tank to actually work on strength.
So those
Um,
people are just weak,
they're
basically.
weak. Yeah. Yep.
They're
Exactly.
not strong because they're not doing strength.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Um, and yeah, that's what people mess up the most. So if I can just shout that from the rooftop, if you get anything from this entire podcast, take that away. In order to work strength, you have to get near failure for 4 to 6 reps, anywhere between 3 and 5 sets. All right. Um, so super fundamental. Some of the other aspects of a good kind of routine. So obviously, as a runner, there's a lot of stuff that you have to work on. You have to work on strength. You have to work on balance. You have to work on jumping and impact control. You have to work on mobility. But the most basic things that you should hit in every kind of routine, basically. So you got strength. The next thing is you need to work on single leg balance. Okay, so runners are always on one leg. If you're on 2 legs, you're probably walking or standing. Um, so every time you're taking a step while you're running, you're balancing on one leg. And obviously, it's not as hard as just standing there because you have forward momentum, you have inertia, which makes balance a lot, better. That's why it's so easy to ride a bike because you have rotational inertia in your tires and then you're moving forward and it makes it easy. Same thing with running. It's while it might not be inherently working on balance when you're running, at a very, very small level, there are components of balance that you have to do because you're on one leg. So making sure that you are working on your balance, you're doing things on one leg, and these don't have to be really complex things. Um, One of the other faults that I see with a lot of runners is they try and do these complex balance exercises or get all these fancy boards and BOSU balls and stability boards and stuff like that. And it doesn't necessarily, they don't need that. A lot of times they can just stand on one leg and add a little bit of resistance, do a movement, and that's plenty. So nailing the basics is going to be essential for that.
Did you see that the video of I think it was I don't want to call anyone out. We're gonna get canceled so fast. Uh there was there was an athlete that was like balancing like between a squat rack like on like a band and like getting a ball thrown to them and was like trying to like balance and like catch this ball. Anyway, it looked ridiculous. And it reminded me of what you're saying. Like it doesn't have to, when you're talking about like this balance and like training that balance, it doesn't, and mobility, it doesn't have to be like super fancy. Like it can be really, really simple
Yeah,
things.
yeah, it can be really simple and it should be really simple. And that's the th same thing with strength too. I mean, there's a lot of complexity out there, especially in like the influencer world of Instagram and even pro runners doing like really complex things. And just
Yeah.
kind of makes me cringe a little bit. I mean, 99% of people having good programs and getting better is just building consistency and doing just nailing the basics. So getting really good at those common exercises that you see everybody do, like squats, deadlifts, hinging, lunges, step ups, just basic stuff before you go into, really complex things. Um, and then, yeah, but back on the balance, that's where people really like to get funky and just reel it in. Don't dive too far into one of those trains. I've recently been talking about the kind of marketing tactics of the balance board world,
Oh
specifically
yeah, I
around
see those
health.
so much
We're
on my
probably not going to
feed.
get sponsored by them either, but specifically with like Sidekick tools. But that little access board they have, and it's cool. We'll see. Actually, they reached out to me and want me to try out their board and give them my honest feedback, which I'll do. So I'll play around with it for a little bit, but 99% of the time, you just need to balance on a leg and add in a little bit of movement or resistance. Um, the other thing that I wanted to touch on that should be kind of one of the basic things that you're doing is jumping and plyos, but maybe first a little bit of a differentiation between the two. So jumping and plyos are not universal term, or they're not, yeah, they don't mean the same thing. Jumping is just jumping, right? So anytime you see someone jumping, it's a jump. It's really simple. Plyos fall under the umbrella of jumping. What is it? It's like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. Is that how that goes? Or is it the other way around?
I never learned that one.
Okay, got it. I think a square is a square
A
is a
square
rectangle.
is a rectangle,
Yeah. All
but a
right. If we have
rectangle
any
isn't a
math
square.
nerds out
That's
there,
correct. That's
send us a
correct.
message and shame us. But basically, plyos fall under the umbrella of jumping. So plyos are specifically the ability to jump, then immediately rebound, then jump again. So you're using the elasticity in your tendons and muscles to stretch and use that stretch to recoil, and that force contribute into your next jump. So that's specifically what a plyo is under the umbrella of jumping. Um, and then the last thing is mobility. So just making sure that the joints that you use for running just move well. So the big hitters are the big toe, the ankle, the hip, and the back. And then after that comes the knee, actually. I mean, the knee is a hinge joint. It's relatively simple. Most people have full mobility unless you've had a surgery and you lack extension or end range flexion. Most of the time you don't need end range flexion. You always need extension though. But most people have that, like I said, unless you've had surgery. So those other mobility kind of characteristics come first. So really just working on kind of those just working on the motion. You can do that in a million different ways. Another thing that's muddled with complexity on the internet, but really just going through the motion of a joint, which anyone can really figure out, kind of taking it to that end range and making sure that you're within those normal limits is going to be really important. Um, so if I had to really say anything about, all of this stuff and building a program, it's keeping things relatively basic is going to make things the most successful, all right, in any type of running strength program. Once once you nail the basics, you don't necessarily stop doing them. You can add in a few more things to make things more complex, maybe for your own mental stimulus. or if you have a very specific thing going on that you need to get better at, you might include more types of exercises and more variations of an exercise to get you better at that. For example, if you have limited dorsiflexion, you might need to work on dorsiflexion in a few different extra ways in order to improve that. But if you have pretty normal dorsiflexion range of motion, you might still just kind of work dorsiflexion like a normal way. Um, but you can deviate from working those basic things, maybe if you have a very specific impairment or injury going on.
So here's a question. So like with running, like the reason you're doing all of these things to become a better runner are because during running you're doing all of these things, right? Like you have to balance, you're basically doing an extended amount of jumps, right? Each step, like you have mobility, your joints are moving. So like why couldn't someone just be like, well, I'm just gonna run more, instead of doing like the strength stuff. If I'm literally doing all of those things while I'm running, like what's different than like why do we need to have this in addition?
Yeah.
And there's
Well,
actually
you're
a listener question that we can get further into this, but yeah, what's your basic answer to that?
Well, you're not necessarily doing all those things when you're running. So you're not working like your full range of mobility all the time. And a lot of times these things can actually get worse if someone's not working them. So for example, people who lack hip extension range of motion or who lack ankle dorsiflexion or whatever, when you're running, you're not necessarily going to force yourself into those positions, but your body's going to compensate to be able to keep you running forward without accessing those things. And that's going to cause problems. Once you start to move in a different way, that takes away from the freedom of motion that you should have, that's where you start to stress things that don't need to be stressed, and it leads eventually to an injury. Um, so you need the things for running, but people don't always have the things for running, but they can still run anyway, until they get hurt. Same thing with like jumping and plyos. So kind of like I said with the whole like forward momentum thing, you don't feel like you're balancing when you're running, right? It's a lot easier to run than to do like a complex balance exercise in terms of balance. So if you can teach your body how to balance and react to certain scenarios when you are running, you're gonna have more success with that. You're going to see a reduce in ankle sprains. You're going to see a reduce in single leg injuries. If you can perfect something outside of the thing that you're actually doing, it'll translate into the thing that you're doing and make you better at it. The body's just really good at moving forward and finding any way to make that possible, without having perfect systems in place.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So just nailing the basics. And in terms of structuring all this out, this is where it gets relatively complicated because there's a lot to think about, like we just talked about, the strength, the mobility, the balance, the jumpings, the plyos, the mobility, core, whatever it is. So people are probably just asking like, okay, so when do I do this stuff and how often and how much? And this is where it starts to where you venture into, a program being actually beneficial for you, and learning how to structure things, because structure is probably the thing that keeps people from being consistent with routines, and not confident with routines, knowing if they're on the right path. So once you kind of have a good understanding of what you need to do for all of those things, the strength, the balance, mobility, etc., figuring out how you can put that into a single routine, how you can put that routine into a week, how you can put that week into a month, and how you can, put that month into a season is going to be the most beneficial thing. So we'll get definitely more into structuring of all of that in the future. But kind of quickly, we're running a little bit short on time here, but um, my general structure that I like to follow, for let's start with kind of daily. The general structure that I like to follow on, any particular day is having a relatively challenging strength lift. Okay. So I like to fall back on squats and deadlifts 2 days a week. All right. Where we're hitting those strength parameters that I talked about easily or talked about earlier. And then always having within those kind of main strength days, having core mixed into that, having single leg balance mixed into that, having jumping mixed into that. So this might look like me having 9 different exercises in a routine. All right. One's going to be strength, one's going to be core, one's going to be balance. All right. And then I'll kind of like cycle through that a lot of the time. So strength, core, balance, strength, core, balance, strength, core, balance. There's a lot of different ways you can structure it, and this is where it's helpful to have someone coaching you through things too, like when to put in jumping, when to put in mobility. I typically like to have my mobility days about 2 days a week that are separate from my strength days, having jumping days that are separate from my strength days as well. And then kind of mixing everything together over the course of a week, where we might have like 5 to 6 days where we're actually doing something, but it's not all strength oriented. So I have two kind of big workouts, and I have supplemental workouts throughout the week as well. Um, and then over the course of months, kind of putting this stuff together. So some might refer to this as like periodizations. It's like, okay, so when are you doing these specific things? If I did squats last week, do I do squats this week? If I did, balance last week, do I do the same balance exercise this week? And the short answer is, I like to kind of progress things like, running coaches maybe progress running a little bit. So you have kind of a building phase, then you have a deload week. You have a building phase, then you have a deload week. So with my strength routines, I like to gradually increase the amount of strength I'm doing. So I might, start one week where I'm doing strength where it's like 3 sets of 10 or 3 sets of 8 or something like that. Then the next week I might progress to 4 sets of 6. Then the next week I might progress to 5 sets of 5 or something. So the weight might be gradually getting bigger. And then I might take a reset week where we take the load off, kind of reset. And then kind of move forward in that realm over the course of like a 4 week period. Then we repeat that, maybe with the same exercises, maybe with different exercises. Really depends on what specifically you're working on. So long as you're working strength and all of those other supplemental things as well.
Do
And I
you
think that's kind of
say,
the. Sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say like, and maybe you'll get into this, like, how much variety do you need? Like, because there's lots of different things that can work the same muscle group or whatever. Like, how much variety do we usually
Yeah,
want to look for?
you don't need a lot of variety. For variety is good for a couple things. So it can be good to be really thorough with a particular joint or muscle group, but it's also good for just like mental stimulation. Some of the big things that I've seen runners complain about in programs is they just get bored with things. So it's just repetitive and it's just boring and it's the same thing over and over again. While I don't think you should necessarily be doing the same exact strength routine every single week, I think that having some basics that you fall back to every week where you are doing some same exercises within the same routine, but then having some variety in how you're doing things. So maybe one week you're doing, step ups. Maybe one week you're doing lateral step ups. Maybe one week you're doing backward step ups. So you're still getting the same exercise of a step up where you're working mainly the same muscle groups, but you add in these small variations where you start to incorporate some supplemental muscle groups as well so your body gets adjusted and adapted to moving in different planes of motion. So variety to a certain extent is ideal. Like keeping the exercises within the same grouping is what you want to do. You don't want to be doing different exercises every single week. Otherwise, you're not going to see any progress. You're just going to get good at doing a bunch of different exercises. Well, you might not even get good at doing them because you're changing them up all the time. So slight variations to exercises, then having exercises where you're doing probably the same thing most of the time.
That makes sense. And that's such a good overview of like how to think about this stuff and what to know, how to think about strength in general.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe so yeah, Vic and I have some listener questions that we want to get to here in the next few minutes. So before we do that, I do want to, or before we get into one that we talked about, that we did have a listener question that I want to do first, actually. And this one's from Tucker, Training with Tucker. Um,
Yeah.
so if anyone doesn't know Tucker, he's a running coach. Training with Tucker on Instagram is his handle. Look him up for sure. But he asked the question of what is what did he say? Basically, he asked, okay, who has the most
Ooh.
races won between the two of us? And we did talk about
Ooh.
this before, but there's another one that I forgot that I need to throw in there. So we talked about how before I had two speed goats on you, you had two Grand Traverses on me and the Mesa Marathon, but you also have another one on me, which I don't know if you can remember, but it was while we were in Chamonix this last year. I
Like
have a
raced
video of the whole
together?
thing too. It was a race. It wasn't a
What?
running race though. Can we put like crickets into this empty space?
Yeah, no, I have no idea. I do not
The
remember.
pistachio eating contest.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
so
yeah.
Vic
Well,
slammed me in how many pistachios you can eat in a minute. I think he beat me by, I think he ate like 27 of them and I ate like 19 or something
yeah,
like
I
that. And you had to sit there
crushed
and you had
you.
to unshell all the pistachios while you're eating them, and it's just it's a timely process. But yeah, so you
But
technically have 4 races won on me now.
I have been training that ever since a young age. Like we grew up eating pistachios, so I have, the advantage there, I think. But
Yeah,
you're right. Yeah, I think I'm up two now if we count that.
nice. All right, listener questions. Which one should we do next?
Yeah. Sorry for my voice again. I know it's probably annoying. I'll try to um edit out my throat clears and stuff if I can. But and hopefully next week I'll be sounding normal. Um so we got a couple of voice memos which we're gonna try to prioritize, and then we got a bunch of Instagram answers on our Instagram questions too. Um but I'm gonna do this first one from Andy, and you'll be able to hear this 1 second. Let me hold it up to the mic.
Hey guys, Andy from British Columbia, Canada. Stoked for the new pod. Quick question. Full-time working father of 2 with not a lot of time to run. I can get in about 8 hours of running a week. My primary goal is to become a better runner. Right now, I've got no time for strength training except a little bit of mobility work at home in the evenings. So what do? Do I knock off an hour and a half out of those 8 hours of running and devote that hour and a half or hour to the gym instead? Or to become a better runner, since I'm doing so little already, do I just keep with the 8 hours a week? Keep in mind, going to the gym means driving away from home to a gym and buying a membership rather than just waking up and running out my door, especially since all I got time to run is quickly in the morning after I wake up and before I go to work. So what do? Do I drop a run for the gym, or can I get away with what I'm doing right now? Peace.
Yeah, I would get some weights, man. I would skip the travel to the, if time is such a constraint, I'd skip the travel to the gym, skip the gym membership fee, get some weights at home, and then implement stuff at home. So, I mean, obviously it's, weights can start to get expensive, but if you can get yourself a few quality kettlebells, or even like a little barbell setup that you find on Facebook Marketplace or whatever it is, you can do most of this stuff on your own relatively quickly. And then I would honestly, if you're feeling the effects of plateauing because you're not strength training, then I would certainly take a little bit of the running out and incorporate strength training. And I might replace whatever mobility routine you're doing with actual strength too, because a lot of people don't really understand this, but working strength, especially if you're working strength like deeply and at end ranges, it's going to increase your mobility too. Strength training actually can increase your mobility more than stretching, more than sitting there and doing mobility exercises. So if you're looking for the most bang for your buck, take a little bit of time after running, ditch the mobility routine, change it with strength, and then kind of move from there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a question that a lot of us have is like, where do we direct that time? We're so busy. We've got so much going on. Like, should we just be running more? Should we just, should we work in these extracurriculars? But I think you're totally right. I mean, that that was the biggest thing for me that you urged me to do is like go buy a couple of cheap weights, like used, just have it at home. Then you don't need to travel to the gym. so much easier. Um, Such a good question, Andy. And Andy's actually a homie. We went on a run together in Thailand when we were over there for Chiang Mai race. Super cool guy, cool family. So thanks for that question. Really good one. Do we have time for one more, do you think?
We have time for one more, then I gotta run.
Okay, I'll do the I'll do the other voice memo that I got. Man, I think my voice is just
It's on its way
destroyed
out.
from coaching all day. All right, let's
Our
see.
coaching voice.
Okay, this one's from Max Reagan. He's one of my athletes. Um, Also very cool guy. All right, here it goes.
What up, Vic and Cam? Max from Netherlands here. In your intro episode, you two mentioned that you met through PZ Tribe. As a former Flagstaff resident, NAU alumni, go Jacks, an avid Pizza Coletta goer, I never knew about the PZ Tribe. I'm curious what it takes to be part of the tribe, and does it count as a sponsorship? Like, are you two getting ZA sent to you on the reg or what? Anyway, I need to know what's up with the tribe bad. Stoked for the pod. Can't wait to get more info from you guys. Peace.
Nice. You want to take this one?
Yeah, thanks, Max. Um, Honestly, I don't know, and I also I don't know if the PT tribe is even still going.
It's not. It's not a thing. It fizzled out
Okay,
very
okay.
fast.
Yeah, Cam's our boots on the ground, still in Flagstaff. Um, I think honestly it was because, well, did you know Caleb? You knew Caleb.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
little bit. He
Yeah.
catered our wedding reception.
Oh, okay. Okay. Was that your intro? Because that was my intro. We knew Jenny was Caleb's girlfriend at the time. Caleb's the owner of PT Clutta. And I knew Jenny through school, through working in the nutrition lab at NAU. And she was like, I'll talk to Caleb, I'll get you in the PT tribe. And like we were talking about last time, it was like me and Cam and like the Coconina Cowboys, basically. Like it was like a bunch of elites.
Yeah, a bunch of pros and elites, and then us. So
Yeah.
we currently don't have any idea of the parameters that let you into it. So, or that let us.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe we
I
can.
they they did give you a card. I don't know if you still have one, but I think
No,
we
I
got like 25% off of the pizzas at Pizza
didn't.
Clutta,
Yeah, I used it
which
for
is
a little
pretty
bit,
good deal.
and then I realized it was kind of not a thing anymore. So I just kind of ditched it.
Yeah.
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 So full price pizzas for me.
Anyway, yeah, if you haven't been to Pizza Clutta in Flagstaff, you should definitely try it. Or Dark Sky Brewery, same company, but well, is it? I don't know. They have the same
It
pizza.
it's the same. Yeah, they have a pizza Pizzicoletta there, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of good pizza here, and there's a new local one too, actually, just to kind of plug this in called Park Drive. You
Ooh.
know, I love all the pizza in Flagstaff, Pizzicletta, Fratelli's.
Oh, is that
Um,
Dane's?
But Park Drive is Dane's restaurant too, and he makes
Yeah.
just really good pizza out of his house right now, and hopefully currently going to be in a space soon. But that's been my go-to lately. Love just hanging out at Dane and Kelsey's house, eating Park Drive. Yeah, it's good stuff, and I think it's going to be the next big thing here in Flagstaff.
That's awesome. Maybe
Yeah,
we can get them to be sponsors of the show.
yeah. But would we? Yeah, maybe a free pizza.
Yeah, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for those questions. Keep them coming. We'll kind of keep this like backlog of questions that we can dip into. So even if we haven't answered your question yet, there's a good chance we will get around to it. And maybe we'll have a whole episodes where we're just like doing Q&A. I don't know. That could be fun.
Uh,
But thank you for listening to my grating gravel voice. It's really deteriorated towards the end of this episode.
I know
Um,
at the beginning it smelled or it sounded like you were like a smooth jazz or
I
a
know, I
radio
know.
host or something like that, and now it kind of sounds like you're eating some sand.
My throat's dying, man.
Yeah, man, go get
Um,
some water, drink some tart cherry juice.
yeah, that's probably what I need. So yeah, thanks for listening. If you are enjoying the show, please Um, like, comment, subscribe, whatever you people do. And then if you're also interested in my online coaching or um, my online self-paced course, check those out. We'll link to those in the show notes. And then we'll link to Cam's programming as well.
Yeah, check it
If you
out.
if you feel like the pod isn't enough to get you through your training and racing, definitely reach out. Thanks again, guys. We'll talk soon.
Peace.
Bye.